Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're tackling a really core thermodynamic challenge. It's basically the thing that separates clean textbook theory from, well, messy physical reality.
Exactly. We're talking about the behavior of gases.
We all start with that simple, elegant, ideal gas law, right? PV equals RT. But we know instinctively that real materials just don't live in that kind of perfect, frictionless universe.
They absolutely don't. And our mission today really is to bridge that conceptual gap for anyone moving into upper-level material science. We're going to use this chapter to map out the transition from that hypothetical, non-interacting, perfect gas model
To the real world.
the real world, where interactions dominate everything. We really need to unpack the key concepts, the derivations, and I think most importantly, the physical interpretations behind them.
Okay, so let's set that baseline first. Ideal behavior. It's just a limit, isn't it? Something we only ever see when the pressure gets really, really low.
That's it. It's strictly observed as pressure approaches zero, where that ratio, PV over RT, finally equals 1. The theoretical perfect gas is the one that follows that rule in all states, which of course ignores that particles have size and attraction.
And that assumption, that perfection, gives us a really clean starting point for the thermodynamics.
A very clean one. If you take a fixed system at a constant temperature, you start with the fundamental Gibbs relationship, dG equals VdP. For an ideal gas, you can just substitute V and integrate.
Right.
And that gives you the molar Gibbs free energy, G as a function of P, and T equals G naught of T plus RT times the natural log of P.
Okay, let's talk about that G naught term, the standard state. Why is that reference point so critical?
It's our anchor. We have to have a fixed point to compare everything to. So we define the standard state as 1 mole of the pure gas at exactly 1 atmosphere of pressure and at whatever temperature we're interested in. Since G is a relative property, you need that reference.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's start adding some complexity. Let's talk about mixtures.
Mm-hmm.
Before we can even mix things, we need a way to describe the composition. And for that, we use the mole fraction, Xi.
Which is just the ratio, right? The moles of component I divided by the total number of moles in the system. Simple as that.
And that mole fraction immediately connects us to Dalton's law of partial pressures for ideal mixtures.
It does. And Dalton's law is crucial. It tells us two things. First, the total pressure is just the sum of all the partial pressures. But second, and this is the key link, the partial pressure of a component, Pi, is just its mole fraction times the total pressure.
So the composition directly tells you how much pressure each component is contributing.
Exactly.
Now, this leads to a concept that I think can feel a bit abstract at first, the partial molar quantity. What is the real so what behind that idea?
Okay, so the definition is just the rate of change of some big extensive property when you add a little bit of one component. But the so what, the reason it matters, is that it quantifies the contribution of a single component inside a big changing system. But the true, most important identity, the one you really have to burn into your memory for thermo, is when that property is Gibbs free energy. The partial molar Gibbs free energy, G bar I, is the chemical potential, mu I.
They're identical.
They are the same thing.
Yeah.
And that is foundational.
Why? What does that identity unlock for us when we're thinking about, say, phase equilibrium?
Because chemical potential, nu I, is the driving force for mass transfer. If you have a component that exists in both a liquid and a vapor phase, it's going to move between those phases until its chemical potential is equal in both. It's the ultimate measure of equilibrium.
Okay, so we have our tools now. Mole fractions, chemical potential. What happens energetically when we mix two perfect gases? If they don't interact, is anything happening?
Well, that lack of interaction is everything. The internal energy, U, of an ideal gas only depends on temperature. So if there are no interactions, the mixing process has to be isothermal.
Same temperature and isoenergetic.
Right, which means the internal energy of mixing, delta U prime mix, is 0. And since we're at constant pressure, the enthalpy of mixing, delta H prime mix, is also 0.
And that's a huge result. No heat is generated or absorbed when you mix ideal gases.
None at all.
So if delta H is 0, then the Gibbs free energy of mixing must be entirely driven by entropy.
Entirely. The derivation gives us delta G prime mix equals the sum of NIRT times the natural log of Xi. Now, since mole fractions are always less than 1,
Their log is always negative.
always negative, which means delta G of mixing is always negative.
Confirming that mixing ideal gases is a spontaneous, irreversible process. It just
Right.
happens.
It just happens. And if we pop that into delta G equals delta H minus T delta S, since delta H is 0, we solve for the entropy of mixing. Delta S prime mix is minus R times the sum of NILM Xi.
So with the negative log, delta S has to be positive.
It has to be, which fits our physical intuition perfectly. You mix things, you increase the randomness, the disorder, you increase the entropy.
Okay, that's the ideal world. Let's crash into reality. Why do real gases, the air we're breathing right now, deviate from that perfect PV equals RT curve?
It boils down to two physical facts the ideal model just ignores. First, particles are not dimensionless points. They have a finite volume. At high pressures, that volume they occupy starts to matter a lot.
And the second reason.
They interact. Real particles feel forces, attractive forces at a distance, and very strong repulsive forces when they get too close. The whole behavior of the gas is a balancing act between those two.
And to measure that deviation, we use the compressibility factor, Z. It's like a report card.
That's a great way to put it. Z is just PV divided by RT. For a perfect gas, Z is always 1. For a real gas, it's all over the place.
Right. If you look at those plots of Z versus pressure, if Z dips below 1, it means the gas is more compressible than you'd expect.
Which tells you the attractive forces are winning. If Z is greater than 1, it's less compressible, meaning the finite volume, the repulsion, is dominant. It's an instant snapshot of the non-ideality.
And this non-ideality becomes really, really clear when you look at the PV isotherms for a real gas. You can actually see the boundary between gas and liquid.
You can. As you plot pressure versus volume at different fixed temperatures, you eventually find this one, single, unique point, the critical point, defined by a critical temperature, critical pressure, and critical volume.
Mathematically, that point is where both the first and second derivatives of pressure with respect to volume go to 0.
It's the highest point, temperature-wise, where liquid and vapor can still coexist as distinct phases.
So what's happening below that critical temperature?
Below T critical, when you compress the gas at a constant temperature, you eventually hit a flat horizontal line on the graph. That's your two-phase region. Liquid and vapor exist together, and the pressure doesn't change until all the gas is condensed.
But above the critical temperature.
That line is gone. You can't turn the gas into a liquid anymore just by squeezing it. You enter this strange state called a supercritical fluid, where the distinction between liquid and gas it blurs away.
And this behavior, it's not unique to one gas. This leads to this amazing predictive tool, the law of corresponding states.
Oh, this is such a powerful engineering shortcut. Instead of dealing with raw pressure and temperature, we use what are called reduced variables. So reduced pressure is just your pressure divided by the critical pressure. Same for temperature.
You're normalizing everything against the critical point.
You are, and by doing that, you're essentially saying all gases, when they're at the same fractional distance from their own critical point, should behave in a similar way.
So two different gases at the same reduced pressure and temperature should have about the same Z value.
Approximately, yes. It's an incredible approximation. It means you don't need a whole library of data for every single gas. You just need its critical pressure and temperature, and you can predict its behavior pretty well.
Okay, let's move from that general observation to probably the most famous specific model for real gases.
Yeah.
The van der Waals fluid model.
Right. It takes the ideal gas law and just bolts on these two correction factors.
The equation is P plus A over V squared times V minus B equals RT. Walk us through what A and B are physically doing.
Okay, so think of it as fixing two problems in PV equals RT. First, the volume term. The constant B corrects for the fact that particles have a finite volume, they take up space. So the actual available volume for movement is the container volume minus that excluded volume. That's the V minus B term.
And the A over V squared term must be fixing the pressure.
It is. It corrects for the attractive forces between particles. Those attractions pull molecules away from the container wall, so they hit it less often and with less force. The pressure we measure, P, is lower than it should be, so we have to add that internal pressure term, A over V squared, back in.
It's amazing that such a relatively simple equation can capture so much complex behavior.
It really is, and you can actually solve for A and B using those mathematical conditions at the critical point. And when you do that, you get a theoretical prediction for the compressibility factor at the critical point, Z critical. It comes out to exactly 0.375, which, for such a simple model, is remarkably close to what we see for many real gases.
Now, when we plot the van der Waals isotherms below the critical temperature, we get that famous S-shaped curve. What is that telling us?
That S-curve is predicting regions of instability. A fundamental rule of thermodynamics is that for a system to be stable, if you increase the pressure, the volume must decrease. The slope has to be negative.
But the middle part of that S-curve has a positive slope.
And that region is one of absolute instability. Nature will not allow a system to exist in that state. It's physically impossible.
So how does the system find the actual stable pressure where liquid and vapor coexist?
Through something called the Maxwell construction. Since a true equilibrium is the state with the lowest Gibbs free energy, this construction finds the one pressure, the one horizontal tie line, where the area of the curve above the line is equal to the area below the line. It's an equal area rule to find the most stable state.
And what about the boundaries of that unstable region, the peaks and troughs of the S-curve?
Those are called the spinodal points. They're the points where that slope, dp by dv, is exactly zero. They represent the absolute limit of metastability. If you manage to get a system to one of those points, the tiniest fluctuation will cause it to spontaneously and catastrophically collapse into the more stable phase.
Okay, finally, we need one more tool. We need a rigorous way to calculate things like free energy changes for these non-ideal gases, where G is no longer a simple function of the log of pressure.
Right, the simple relationship breaks down. And for that, we introduce the concept of fugacity, which we use the letter F for.
The thermodynamic pressure.
That's the perfect term for it. It's a function that we define so that it restores that beautiful, simple Gibbs relationship. dg equals RT, d log ff.
So fugacity is the effective pressure that lets us use our ideal gas math on a real gas.
Precisely. We define the standard state as fugacity equals 1, and we require that fugacity approaches pressure as pressure approaches 0. That keeps everything consistent with ideal behavior at low pressures.
And we can link fugacity right back to Z, our non-ideality report card.
We can. There's an integral relationship. The natural log of f over p is the integral from 0 to p of z minus 1 over p dp. It's the rigorous way to use experimental Z data to calculate the true thermodynamic pressure.
The examples in the text are great for this. For a gas like hydrogen compressed to 150 atmospheres, the total change in Gibbs free energy is huge, something like 11,000 joules.
A very large number, but the real power of the fugacity calculation is that it tells you how much of that change is specifically due to non-ideality. And in that case, it's maybe only 70 or 80 joules. It's a small correction, but for high-precision engineering, it is an essential one.
This has been a really complete journey. We started with the ideal baseline, showing that mixing has zero heat effect but a positive entropy change. Then we dove into real behavior with the Z factor, the critical point, and the law of corresponding states. And finally, we looked at the correction models, but the physical van der Waals equation and the mathematical rigor of fugacity.
And what's really fascinating to me is that the van der Waals model forces us to see that the internal energy, U, of a real fluid depends on both volume and temperature. That's because of that a parameter, the attraction term. It introduces a volume dependence. And that raises a really interesting question for you to think about.
Go on.
So, given that scientists are constantly designing materials to store or release energy under extreme pressure, how might they leverage those specific material constants, A and B, a material's inherent interaction strength and molecular size, to predict or even tailor that material's ability to handle thermal energy in those high-pressure, non-ideal environments?
A question that connects molecular level properties directly to real-world engineering. A perfect place to leave it. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the behavior of gases chapter, from the source material, introduction to the thermodynamics of materials.
Until next time.